Content warning: the stories and themes shared throughout this podcast may contain themes that can be distressing for you. If needed, please pause and do what you need to do to take care of yourself. If needed, please reach out to a mental health professional for support.
Welcome back to another episode of Resilient AF with Blair and Alana, but no Alana today, so let's pause Alana and bring in Jazzy. So, you know what I love? So, the person I'm about to introduce, I actually had the pleasure of meeting in person, and she was connected to me from a dear friend. And you are going to fall in love with her. This 20 to 30-minute interview is just not enough of her. She's one of the nicest, most beautiful humans inside and out that I've ever met. And she literally has the biggest heart, which is also part of her story, sort of. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Jasmariah Swenson. She's the owner of Vulnerable with Me. She started this community, this business, this company to expand vulnerability. She's published a poetry book. She has been featured in our book, Resilient AF Stories of Resilience, Volume 2. She was on a billboard in Times Square with our other co authors where I got to hang out with her. She's an inspired writer who loves creating from her intuition. In fact, Vulnerable with Me, she just shared, came to her in a dream. And I love that because the best ideas always come when you dream and when you rest. And her words take you on a journey. She is such a beautiful writer. No matter what life throws at her, which has been a lot, she always finds a way to make it through with a beautiful perspective, which is why I love you so much. And I think why we connect so much because life has life has not been easy for you. And you've gone down some windy dirt roads, but you always have that beautiful silver lining, that perspective. So Jazzy, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
So originally, like, I met you through our friend Reed.
Hmm.
And I've known Reed for a few years, and he's like, you need to meet my friend Jazzy. She has quite the story. And that's, kind of how we met, was about your stories with your open heart surgeries and, having children's and a gene mutation. But today we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about something that you and I haven't really talked about.
Hmm.
And I think it's a really important conversation. And I think we're also going to, touch on all of those other things. But you're very young. For those of you who can't see her, who aren't watching the YouTube video, she's very young and very wise, and she has a lot of lessons to share. So I guess, why don't we talk about your story?
Yeah, so today I wanted to share a story that I recently just went full on public with in a way where I'm no longer protecting the person who hurt me. And it was really liberating to feel that. And I think what's super important about my story was like, it took me a long time to get here. So when I was about 7 years old, my parents brought from Samoa, which is where they currently live, they brought over my mom's cousin to help him get a better life here in America, the American dream. And with him living with us, he ended up sexually abusing me, molesting me, and I didn't understand what was going on when I was a kid. I was confused, and I did tell like two cousins that this happened, and they were around my age, so we didn't think anything of it. He still like lived with us, and he was really nice to me, like a really good uncle figure. So I thought, like, maybe this will just go away. But like with any trauma, it doesn't go away. So it ended up like just haunting me. It was like this every day I would just try not to think about it, and that wouldn't happen. And as I got older, I started learning more, and I realized, hey, what he did to me was wrong. So I finally got the courage to tell my mom what happened because she had no idea. And I was 16 years old when it happened, when I had the conversation with my mom, and her first initial reaction was not what I expected. I went there like expecting to just be comforted and, be supportive and all the stuff you want a mom to do. But my mom, I think she was just in shock. So she reacted in a way where she almost didn't want to know that it happened. And when she did, like a few days later, she ended up talking to me and was like, "Hey, I asked this person like about this and he's saying it didn't happen and all of this stuff." And I was sitting in the car and I was like, "Okay, well, it did happen." And she was like, "Well, are you sure that you didn't dream it?" And I got out of the car immediately because I was like, "I no, did not dream this." And I held so much resentment for my mom. Like that memory was so dark for me. Obviously, being sexually abused is dark, but when you're looking for comfort and opening up and then receiving it that way, it was just really dark. So I was just drowning in this trauma and feeling like so alone.
Wow. Wow, that's heavy, Jazz.
Mhm.
Like very heavy, and I'm so sorry you went through that. And thank you for sharing it. And I know you only recently went public with it. And I can't imagine because it was a family member how much courage that would have taken, A, for you to speak to your mom at 16, but also to be public about it.
Mhm.
And, not only, being public about it, but reliving it. And, how old were you when it happened?
I was around 7 years old, like, and then I think it continued. Like, it stopped when I turned 8. I remember because I remember that I got baptized at 8 years old. And then I have like this weird thing. I'm just like, did I get baptized for his sins? Because he didn't. So I always like have that memory of when it stopped.
Interesting. I feel like there's like something very poetic in a
Mhm.
dark, Shakespearean way about, being baptized for his sins. And so that was happening for about a year. And about 9 years later, you finally speak to your mom about it, and she went into denial and
Mhm.
gaslight you. Like that's its own level of trauma right there.
Mhm.
How did you and your mom get through that?
It took a while. Like, I barely started my healing journey about 2 years ago, and that's the first conversation that I ended up having with my parents. I was at my first like women's retreat and I ended up leaving a day early because I'm like, I need to go home. And like, I just had this like urge that like this conversation needs to happen. So I went home and luckily my parents were there like helping me with the kids. So I had the conversation of, hey, I'm going to start sharing my story because until then I was just such a private person.
Hmm.
And I was like, I want you guys to know this because I like to be respectful too. Like at the end of the day, they're my parents, but also I think we don't realize that our parents are people too. And then receiving accountability was something that I didn't expect. I had the conversation with my mom about what happened, how I told her, and she was so remorseful. And she's like, I don't know what was going on in my life to like not be there for you and not support you. And she's like had all of this guilt, just crying. And I I was shocked because I was like, I didn't expect an apology from my mom. I was mostly just telling her this is what I'm doing. And the way that she's responded, and over the past 2 years, the way that we've healed together and have had these open conversations. Someone at the retreat told me she was a mom, and this is why I went home. She told me that never stop having the conversation with your parents because even though you think they're not listening, the wheels are turning. And she was like, it took me a while to come around to my kids. And I was like, oh, okay. So maybe like, I don't think that from my perspective, she's listening to me, but maybe she's processing in a different way that I don't see.
Wow. Wow, that's really powerful. And I think the fact is like that 2 years ago you're at a retreat, your intuition said, I gotta go deal with this now, I gotta leave, is so powerful. And like I haven't been in your situation, but I did have a situation where I fled an abusive relationship and I ended up homeless for a few weeks.
Mm,
And I needed support from a family member, and the conversation wasn't met with empathy or sympathy. It was met with anger and shame. And I decided to solve the problem on my own, and I did, but I needed support from my family. And a few years later, because I carried that resentment, and a few years later, I actually brought that up to this family member, and we had the most beautiful conversation, and they didn't even realize, they don't even remember that. And what happened was I realized that what in like my healing was what happened to me was a trigger for them.
mm,
And it triggered them, and they didn't see it as like me, Blair, needing help and being in a dangerous situation. They just saw it as something it wasn't. And it's interesting because sometimes that time is needed for the situation to sink in, although it doesn't make it right. Because
yeah.
you needed help you needed support when you were 16, you needed support when you were 7.
Mhm,
And it's scary, like, it was a family member living with you.
mhm.
Can I ask you some hard questions? Did you ever confront the family member?
I did not, but there was a time when I was in high school and he had come over to our house, and I go in to like the family room kitchen area, and he's right there, and he's like expecting a hug, and I like froze. But this is the last time I saw him too, and I was like, no. And then they're like, my parents are looking, and like he's looking, and I was like, no, I'm not going to hug you. And I just walked out of the house. I'm like, you're never going to touch me again. Like, even if it's a hug, like, I don't want to see your face. It was like,
Mhm.
just
Did you say this?
no. But like, I did tell him, no, I'm not going to hug you. And I just walked out because my dad didn't know. And
Mm.
it's like, I was scared for my dad to know because I'm my dad's like princess. I'm my dad's everything. So I was afraid like my dad would react in not the best way.
Does your dad know now?
He does know now.
Is this family member still, well, I guess your parents are in Samoa and you're in America. Where is this family member now?
I'm pretty sure that they're in California. And
Away
that's
from you, not
yeah,
near you.
far away.
That's a lot. That's a lot. What do you wish, like if you could talk to 7-year-old Jazzy, what would you say to her?
So I've actually done this
Oh,
in a journey before where I've gone back, and it was kind of so someone was kind of like guiding me, and I was in that memory. And what was so cool was the person that was guiding me. This was in the beginning of my healing. They were like, "Well, tell her that it's okay." And then I was like, well, I'm not going to tell her that because immediately as I heard that and I was in the memory, she was just like, it's not okay. And I was like, you're right. So, more than anything, she just wanted to be comforted and just knowing that she's not doing anything wrong. Because a lot of the time when this happens, we blame ourselves. We're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have froze. I should have done something more, like, all of these things. But we don't realize how trauma responses work. And this same family member had tricked me into drinking beer one time. Like it was a McDonald's cup, and he's like, drink it. And I'm like, what is it? And he's like, apple juice. And I drink it, and it's beer, and I'm like bawling my eyes out. So there were instances that I saw in him that when I'm able to look back now past the memory, my body knew that this was not a safe person. If we were going to do something, like what more would have happened to us? So just telling her that it's not her fault is like so huge. And then just comforting her. Like that's what she wanted, was to not feel alone in this trauma.
that's beautiful. And it probably felt so lonely, right? I mean, it took you a long time to even tell your parents about it. And I can't imagine the feelings of like this being scared and wondering like why this was happening. And where you are now, like now you have kids.
Mm-hmm.
What do you, and I'm not saying that this will like I don't have kids, so I don't know what this is like, and I just want to like preface that. But I know that I have a lot of friends with children, and
Mhm.
like their like radar is up. Like they are concerned about a lot of things.
Yeah.
What can you like what are you doing to protect the kids in your life? Not just your kids, but like because you were there, how do you protect the next generation of children?
It's exposing these people and not protecting them because it's like what we've grown up with culturally and generational is like, oh, we're focused on protecting the image or protecting the predator when really we need to be protecting the kids. So I have had these conversations with my son who's 11, and even when he was like 7, just like starting to introduce it. Hey, just so you know, like this is your private area and like no one's allowed to touch it. And like same goes for like other people, like So I think I don't ever remember having the sex talk or anything like that with my mom, but these conversations are so important for our kids because if we don't have the conversations with them, where are they going to learn it? Or if they don't learn it and this happens to them, what are they going to do? And I think it's key for me to make sure that I'm staying safe enough for my kids
Hmm.
where if something does happen, their first thought is like, oh my gosh, this happened to me. I need to call my mom.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important is like having those conversations and also letting them know like if something happens, this is what you do.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault. And I think that's important for all these situations because sometimes as kids, they look to adults as like the responsible one, the safe person, but not every adult or even older kid is safe.
Right.
Yeah, that's really good advice. If you were to sit down and have a or not sit down and have a conversation, but if you were to give a message to this person who violated you, who assaulted you, what would you say to him?
It would be the shirt that I created. So I created a shirt because I heard you like talking in our billboard Times Square book launch and how you are giving proceeds to other charities from your merch. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to create merch and it's going to go to like those things that like just light me up. So I made this shirt and it's Medusa and it's from a poem that I wrote and it says, it's your turn to freeze when you see my face. So I'm no longer freezing in this person's presence. If I see him, like you're going to be intimidated. You're going to wish that you never did that. And
Yes. Take back that power. And I love that. And so where are the proceeds being donated?
So I'm not business savvy at all, so I'm trying to figure all of that out. But 10% is going to go towards the healing of people who have gone through sexual abuse or sexual assault, whether it's healing with me or maybe toward a retreat that I can help sponsor. Or in April, me and a friend are putting together this event for Sexual Abuse and Assault Awareness Month. And we're just trying to make it more affordable and accessible for women who just can't afford it.
I think that's brilliant. And I love that you created that shirt. And maybe what we'll do is make sure there's a link in the show notes so people can purchase the shirt if they want to. So make sure you get that to me. I think that's really beautiful, and I love that you were inspired by, what we're doing, and when people like you, can turn their pain into power, their pain into purpose in a way to shed light on these untouchable, talkable like topics, like the taboo stuff that our parents' generation said don't talk about. We're doing a favor to fellow survivors and people going through it and helping make people aware. And so I think that's really, really powerful that you're doing that, Jazzy. So congratulations. That's amazing. Okay, so you've written a poetry book. You've just launched a new shirt. You're gonna tell, this person like it's your turn to freeze, bitch. Like
Yeah.
it's on you. I'm taking back my power. What else are you working on right now?
Other than the event, I'm just trying to really, I'm super open to all of the possibilities of, what does the universe want me to create? And all of these different things have just been coming to me. And I think I just want to create something with more connection, and sharing my story is so important because other people don't feel alone. And I think that's what's so important is we feel so alone in our lives, and really we're not alone. And I would just encourage people to not take that initial reaction like I did or like you did with your family member, but maybe continuing to have that conversation because it could be a trauma response
Mhm.
or it could be they don't know how to handle it. But receiving accountability is so healing from that moment. So always do what's best for you and go for everything. Anything is seriously possible.
Anything is possible. And, you know, I think like, because not, this is just a piece of your story. Like, we didn't even touch on all of your heart stuff. Like, you are only what, a couple months out of an open heart surgery?
So I'm 3 months out from, and so I had my open heart on November 3rd of 2023, and then on November 4th of 2024, they reopened me up to take my wires out and then move all of this muscle over to like protect my sternum because there was nothing protecting it. So I don't know. This surgery like almost feels a little worse than the open heart because it's my incision has opened 2 times. And when you're moving all of the muscles from your upper body, it's horrendous. And
Oh,
pain medication doesn't work for me, so I just suffer.
oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. And you have three young kids. Like, how old are your children right now?
So my oldest son Christian is 11, and then my twins Zen and Kenai are 2.5.
You're a powerhouse. Like, I can't even keep my plants alive. Wow, that's amazing. And like the fact that you're doing all this and creating all this and, you know, while navigating, like basically you just got your, you know, that removed and having surgery, it's a big deal. Like you are definitely someone who is, you know, making moves and, you know, you're super resilient. Like obviously you're resilient AF. And, you know, as we kind of wrap this up, I think having you share some advice for maybe someone who's going through something similar, maybe someone who went through something when they were younger with a family member and they haven't shared it with anyone or they shared it with someone like their parents but was met with a similar response to you. What is your advice to them?
I would just say realizing that it's not your fault. You're not alone, and nothing is wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with like many of us. Sometimes we try to fix ourselves or change ourselves, and that's so great. But I think what's so beautiful is more understanding ourselves. And when we realize that there's nothing wrong with us, and really we just are going to go in and understand ourselves on a deeper level, like, why did I do that? Oh, I was actually hurting, and that's why I acted that way. But understanding and loving ourselves and just have compassion. We've all gone through trauma, we've all done things that we wish we didn't like do, and we're all just living the human experience. So reach out to someone, and I promise that you're not alone in your story.
You are not alone. That's beautiful advice. So thank you so much for coming on an episode of Resilient AF. You are just such a light in this world. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Such an honor to be here.
I love it. And to everyone who tuned in to another episode of Resilient AF, thank you. Thank you for spending time with me and Jazzy and for all the other episodes you will listen to, you have listened to. We drop a new episode every week, every Tuesday on your favorite podcast player, on YouTube. If you're like listening, you're like, I want to watch Blair and Jazzy talk, go head to our YouTube. All those links are in our show notes. And just remember, you know, you don't have to go through the hard stuff alone. It's completely okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel sad and have all these big feelings and feel griefy, and you will get through it. You need to put one foot in front of the other and know that we are that lighthouse in the storm for you. We are here with you to walk through it, to hold your hand, and that you, my friends, are resilient AF. That's a wrap for another episode of Resilient AF with Blair and Alana. And thank you for listening. Are you feeling inspired to bounce forward?
Let's connect at theglobalresilienceproject.com, where you can read many stories of resilience, buy our books, shop our clothing line, learn more about how to strengthen your resilience muscle, be empowered, and more.
Remember, friends, you are resilient AF.